And April, take it away.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Oops. So yes, thanks for having me. I'm sorry you guys can't see me very well. The sunshine disappeared. And so now I told Christy I feel like I'm in the witness protection program. But I'm very excited. I have been working with different organizations for a couple of years now. One of our focuses has been worksite wellness and other initiatives just to try to create healthier spaces throughout our community. But obviously, a lot of things have changed pretty quickly over the last few months. So, my goal today is to sort of orient us just about worksite wellness in general. So, obviously, some of the things that we're going to talk about and look at in the presentation may not be totally relevant or possible under our current circumstances, but I just want to kind of give you guys an idea of what a program might look like. And then as we progress over the next couple of months, we're going to delve more deeply into what current needs are. So we're going to talk a lot more about mental health and wellness and working remotely and just some of the needs that you might see both be feeling personally or that you might hear in your work site or as you talk to coworkers what people are needing, and we're going to talk about how to address those needs. So just wanted to kind of give you that disclaimer. And I know most of us are spending a lot of time on Zoom these days or on the computer, so I do definitely encourage conversation. I think it's always a lot more interesting if we stop and talk along the way. So yes, please feel free to interrupt me, and I'm going to try to ask you all some questions along the way too. So you can feel free to unmute yourself to answer questions, or you can use the features to give a thumbs up or raise a hand. And as Christy said, she will monitor the chat. So here's what I'm hoping we will accomplish today. So I want to make sure we all have a basic understanding of worksite wellness and then have some really concrete things to share to be able to make the case for why worksite wellness is important, both as you're recruiting coworkers to your committee to get started, and then also as you're making the case to those higher up decision makers who may need, whose buy-in you're definitely going to need. We're going to provide information on how to get started and how this is going to be vital to the work of your organization. It's going to be different for every organization, but worksite wellness definitely has a lot of benefits for every organization. We're going to go through some steps on how to get started. And as you may have seen, these are interactive workshops. So we're going to start that framework today, but there will be some work to do in between sessions. And my goal is that by the time January rolls around, everybody will have a really concrete plan in place. You'll either have already started a worksite wellness program. You'll have made some progress if that's something that you already have in place and maybe revitalized it or made a little bit of headway. Or you'll know what steps you need to take, and we will be able to help you overcome some obstacles you might be facing. And as we said, things are different these days. So we are also going to talk about some more immediate needs and how that might change what a traditional worksite wellness program looks like based on how we're all working these days and some things that people want to focus on. Okay, so we have a couple of slides here just talking about defining wellness. I think this is really important for every organization to come up with its own kind of shared definition of wellness, because when I talk about things like health or wellness, my idea of what that means might be different than yours. And if we're working together and we're trying to start a wellness committee or wellness initiatives, what I think that means and what you think that means could be very different and could really impact people's interest in participating. So, we're trying to give you a couple of different definitions that you can start from, and we want them to be as comprehensive as possible, because if somebody has the impression that a wellness committee is just going to be about weight loss or exercise, that might be very motivating for some people. For others, that might be something that they already feel like they have a good handle on outside of work and don't really have an interest in that being part of their workplace. And for other people, it could just be a major turnoff, that's just, they don't want someone telling them what to do, or they don't want to feel judged. So they may be totally disinterested and maybe putting up some barriers that don't need to be there if they're not bought into the idea of wellness. So it's important that the definition of wellness really reflects the full organization, and make sure that it's as inclusive as possible for what the needs of the staff are. So yes, wellness can include our physical health, and that's everything from, yes, fitness, so how we're moving our bodies, what we're eating. It's also about just how we're taking care of ourselves in general, our general health. It also, though, involves our social wellness. So how do we feel connected? Do we have a support network? What is the dynamic like with coworkers? This is obviously getting more and more important through COVID, as people are unable to do some things that maybe they've done in the past, like eating lunch together or socializing outside of work. So this is something that we will focus more on, and how do we still promote this social communal feel within our coworkers and our work setting, even if we are not all actually together. Emotional wellness, again, this is something that we will be focusing a lot on, that is becoming more and more relevant. So we always have work stress, but now there are other external stressors that may be impacting or impeding our work. And our own mental health may be affected right now. And that, although that may seem like it's something that's separate from work, we know it never really is. And so creating space to be able to talk about some of these things and ensure that we are feeling like we can still be supported at work, and that these are not taboo topics that we can't discuss at work. So we want to kind of break down some of those barriers. Spiritual wellness does not have to be religious. It could be for some people, but it could also be about just a feeling of connection, providing hope. We're getting into the holiday season, so finding ways to connect to our greater community, engage in some charitable activities. Those are things that we may choose to focus on in the upcoming months. And then how are we supporting our own and our colleagues' professional development, advancement, and just feeling really supported with our career development and our own professional journeys? And do we feel that we work in a worksite that is safe, that is supportive? It's an environment that we're able to function and do our job well. So those are just some of the things to consider when you're thinking about defining wellness for your organization. And again, just making it as broad as possible so that everybody that you work with should feel like worksite wellness is something that's going to be helpful and important to them. So there's just some other definitions that could be useful. And they start to kind of touch on our next part of the presentation, which is building that case. So not only is worksite wellness going to be, kind of like a nice perk is what some people might think of it as, but it's really a lot more than that, because it's going to promote productivity. It reduces absenteeism. It makes sure that when people are at work, they are safe, so they're not going to get injured and have to take time off of work. It's going to save companies money without having to have workman's comp cases or time off. And so there's just, again, some more examples. And improving employee morale and retention. We know that happy employees tend to stick around longer and work harder. They also miss fewer days of work. They're more productive and have fewer healthcare costs. So these are some of the things that could be addressed through worksite wellness, and it just kind of shows the costs attached to those. So again, some things that maybe aren't in everybody's initial definition of wellness. So again, thinking about mental health. So there's huge cost attached to feeling stressed or depressed. So that's why it's important to include that in your worksite wellness plan. And then you can see some of these other. So depending on who you work with and what people's needs are, will also impact whether or not some of these things might be included in your worksite wellness program. So you can see there's lots of preventable factors that can be addressed through worksite wellness. And again, we don't have to address all of these, but the ones that could be relevant, you would want to include. So one of the first things that you're going to need to do is get some management support. So we need the decision makers to back a worksite wellness program. So using some of the slides that we just talked about to build that case to show how it's going to benefit the organization. Also, again, making sure that it feels relevant to those decision makers. So if they are feeling like, oh, this is not the time for us to be focused on this, you can build that case for there's never been a better time. People are feeling this extra stress. We need to build this support around people. That it doesn't have to just be about one thing or another. Or if we say we already have a healthy staff, well, there's lots of ways that we can still focus on wellness that may have a broader definition. Also want to have those discussions about budget. So there are lots of things that can be done through a worksite wellness program that are low or no cost. There's also things that can be done to raise funds in the future. So talking about what sort of resources you have available, and if budget is an obstacle that you're being told is preventing this, being able to build that case that there's still things that can be done, that work can still be furthered without financial support in the beginning. And hopefully as the program progresses, then management will be more apt to want to invest. You just need that senior level champion. So I will give you an example. So in our organization, it has been vital for our executive director to support our wellness organization. It does not mean that he is able to be present at every wellness committee meeting or that he participates in every wellness committee activity. Those things are also great. But what he is able to do is allows us time at every total staff meeting to present about wellness. He might send a message out to staff in support of an activity, just giving us that time to talk about it, putting it on meeting agendas, and then just hearing back from him, giving some of that positive feedback really shows that it's an organizational value. And that's probably the most important thing that we could have in order to keep our wellness work going forward. He's also able to advocate to the board for some funding at times to support some activities. That's just not something that we could do without that senior level support. And then you want to have a system in place for collecting feedback and then reporting back to your team, and letting those senior decision makers know that that's going to be a part of this is definitely going to go a long way to creating that buy-in, because they're going to know that it's going to be the right fit for the right organization. And at the end of the day, I think all of us probably here know it's the right thing to do, right? We want to have happy, healthy employees. And I think everybody wants that, but sometimes we can get caught up in some of the things that might stand in our way. So being able to build that case in the beginning is important. So once we have some management support, what are we going to do next? We're going to assemble a committee. It can seem like the people that you would want on your committee would be the healthiest people, the people who already are really active, who do a lot of things to support their own personal wellness. And those people can absolutely be great committee members, but you do not want a wellness committee that only has people who are already really doing a lot for wellness on the team. Otherwise, it can feel very exclusive. And again, some people who maybe aren't really bought into it are not going to want to join the committee if they don't feel like it represents who they are, their own personal practices. So you want the most diverse committee you can have. You want all of the people who are your naysayers, who don't seem like this is an idea that they're really supportive of. You want to get them to the table and find out what their concerns are, and then work to make sure that you can address those concerns. So you want the most diverse committee possible in terms of just different views and values. And also you want to make sure that every aspect of your organization is represented. So, it should not just be frontline staff. You want to have different levels of management. You want to have some representatives from HR, from finance, from all of the different offices that would be part of your organization. If you have an organization that has multiple sites, you would either want to have a representative from each of those sites, or, in this day and age, maybe doing something over the computer so that more people can participate. or even having subcommittees that can work on different site-based initiatives and then report back to a larger committee. Those could all be options. But you definitely want to have as many people to represent all facets as possible. You also can have outside organizations as part of your committee. So you could look for other local partners that are doing great things, that can bring resources in. Maybe they can present on different topics. They could be members of your committee because they can bring up really great ideas that maybe your staff hasn't thought about, especially if you're just getting started. They can bring a lot of resources to the table and new ideas, and they can tell you what things they have seen out in the community. Again, yeah, they can educate staff on some of these topics. And if you aren't able to partner with an outside organization, finding ways to provide that education to your team is going to be really important. And we're going to talk more about the different resources that are out there. Once you have a committee in place, and even as you're starting to kind of put your committee together, you can also be working on this. Again, you want to get as much input on the front end as possible. We're going to talk about more about what the survey can look like, but you really want to ask people what's important to them in terms of wellness. What types of activities would they like to see in their workplace? What are some of the things that their personal goals that they're trying to work on? What things make it hard for them to be healthy at work? Getting as much input as possible. What types of changes to the environment would they like to see to make it easier to be healthy? So for an example, if there is not a place for people to put their lunch, like a refrigerator or a staff kitchen space, people might feel like it's really hard to pack a healthy meal. So they're always going out to a fast food restaurant or stopping someplace and picking up some kind of takeout. Makes it really hard for them to be healthy during the day. So could that be a goal? Is there a way to raise some funds to put in a refrigerator so people have a place to put their lunch? That's just one example. Once you have that input, then you can start to set some goals and develop an action plan. It's really important to get that input first because you could have a really awesome committee that has great ideas about how to get started, and they plan all these fantastic activities, and then nobody shows up. And there's lots of reasons why maybe nobody shows up. Maybe they don't show up because the time didn't work for a lot of people. They didn't like the activity. It conflicted with other work or personal events that prohibited them from participating. Or they didn't feel like they were able to use that time to participate, that maybe their boss didn't think this was a priority. Getting that input on the front end is going to prevent you kind of wasting the time, putting all that energy into great activities that aren't a good fit for the organization, or that your organization isn't ready for. We have seen that happen before. We've had people come up with some really fantastic, exciting ideas about doing recipe swap outs, like healthy recipe challenges, things like that. And they put a lot of effort into it and then didn't really get the results they were looking for because that wasn't really what staff wanted to focus on at that time. Had they gotten that input on the front end, they would have known that that wasn't a priority right now. And then once you have that action plan and you have set those goals that are based on the input you've received, making sure you have a way to communicate that to staff. So if it's through a staff meeting, if it's through emails out to staff, if it's creating a staff newsletter, you'll also have to find out how staff best like to be communicated with, but finding a way to let them know, hey, we heard you. These were the top activities that came out of the survey we did. And so here's how we're going to put that into action. And finding ways to celebrate successes all along the way. You want to celebrate all of the people that participate. You want to celebrate your committee. And success is going to probably look really small in the beginning. Success doesn't mean that everybody in your organization always participates. That finding those small successes and celebrating those are going to keep the team motivated and hopefully will encourage more participation as your committee grows. And then you're going to constantly evaluate. Okay, we collected this information from staff. We set some goals. We put those goals into action. We held some activities, and here's what the participation looked like. Were we successful? What would we do different next time? What information did we not consider? That's your evaluation process. And that just continues, it's ongoing. Okay, so before we go any further, I'd love to hear from you guys a little bit about where you're at in the process. So I'm going to try to, I don't know if I can see everybody at once. I can't see everybody. So you can either raise your hand or feel free to unmute yourself and just kind of give a little shout out. Who already has a wellness committee in place? You can also put your answer in the chat.
I see Camille. Camille, did you want to talk?
All of these things sound absolutely amazing, but everything has to be amended for COVID. I'm thinking, is there any way to do like a group we, or, Elisa Sansone, walk your miles in unison somehow over Zoom or something? I mean, not that we really want to see everybody's living room, but I'm thinking of ways to implement this in practice in this point in time. I mean, right now I'm working from home waiting for a COVID test result. So, this sounds great and I want to share a refrigerator, but we're not allowed.
Right. I hear you, Camille. That's really important.
I want to do all of these things except to implement it in this kind of time of like distance and stuff. It's even harder.
Mm-hmm.
Motivate people, get people together. They don't even want to join the Zoom conference for work. It seems like all of the obstacles are compounded in this particular period. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I will say, I absolutely agree with everything that you just said. I will say that our wellness committee, while I think it's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride over the past 6 months, like probably everything else, work and personally related, we've seen actually some increases in staff participation in some ways because I think people are really desperate for some socialization and some connection. So I'll give you a couple of examples. And again, next month, we're going to talk more about this, but some things that have worked in our organization. So all of our wellness committee meetings, we meet monthly, are happening over Zoom or Microsoft Teams right now. One benefit is sometimes it's a little easier for people to fit meetings into their schedule when they don't have to travel anywhere, or we're not going many places for work these days. So not out in the community doing programming. So sometimes staff are more able to attend at this time. I know that's not always true. We send out agendas ahead of time so people know what the meeting's going to be about. We have a really short and sweet focus. And yeah, it's really different than what we did before COVID. Some of the activities that we have done over these times, we have done some classes and activities over Zoom. We had like a personal trainer from Cornell do like a fitness class that people could participate in. But we've also done things like bingo, virtual bingo, which has been very popular. And then we send people little e-gift card prizes through the mail, or put things in people's mailboxes. Right now, our staff does come into the office once or twice a week. So if you can leave something in somebody's mailbox. So we've had these kind of like virtual meetups. We've sent out a lot of resources, and then we've done a lot of challenge events where people could participate at their own pace. So early on in COVID, we did group Appalachian Trail. So our goal was to hike the Appalachian Trail as a staff. And so people would log. The goal was to get people up and moving, because we recognized that as we were working from home, we were not walking, we're not moving, we're sedentary a lot more, and that's a huge problem. It's not good for us physically, and it's not good for our mental health. So we were trying to encourage people to get out and do some more walking. So we had this Appalachian Trail challenge. So people would log their steps, they would send them to me, and then I would calculate our total miles walked each week. And then I would give just some really silly highlights about where we were on the Appalachian Trail and some of the features that we were encountering in that area. And we set a goal of at what point we wanted to finish the hike for the Appalachian Trail. And it was really fun because it was totally voluntary. Not everybody had to participate, but we saw people would send little emails and kind of encourage each other. It was anonymous, so nobody had to know how far you walked versus your coworker. Sometimes we've done things that have been a little more competitive. Sometimes people are motivated by that. But we did several challenges like this where it was just kind of self-reporting, and then we would give weekly updates. And it was just a way to kind of help people feel like they could participate in something together. Different things are going to appeal to your organization. But you're right. Some of these things are not going to be possible in the way that they were pre-COVID. But I think there are new opportunities that can come up. And we will definitely talk more about those. Let's hear from some other people. Where are you at in your process? Do you have a wellness committee? Are you hoping to get one started? What's going on with everybody else?
I can say from the chat, I see one of our attendees is a solo librarian in their library, and so that makes it a challenge to develop a committee or anything like that. But a workaround perhaps is to work with other libraries in the system, so that would be nice. And another person mentions that they already have something called a culture club that meets lately via Zoom. They discuss communication, mindfulness, leadership, books, etc., which is great. And they also do community cleanup projects.
I love that culture club because, again, if you have an organization that, health or wellness, those buzzwords can be enticing to some, but maybe off-putting to others. Culture club might be a better fit for your organization. So I love how that has a really broad perspective, maybe outside of traditional wellness, but obviously still meets those wellness needs. That's really cool. And yes, I agree. It could be really challenging if you have a really small staff or you're working solo, but finding a connection outside of just your individual location. I had worked on some wellness initiatives in the past, and one of the things that we had done pre-COVID was we have these toilet talks. So we put up different topics each month, and I would post them in all the bathrooms. So people had some light reading while they were using the restrooms that were around whatever our topic of the month was. So I would share those out with all the other organizations that I knew were working on wellness committees. And I would love to see that happen more. It could also happen maybe over social media. So having a closed group with different organizations that are focused on wellness so that you can find ways to connect if you're not able to get that committee together within your own building, could be a suggestion. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the things that might come out of your survey. And again, some of this was created pre-COVID. So not all of these are going to be things you're going to necessarily choose to focus on right now, but just to give you an idea of all of the different types of areas that could be addressed. So they don't have to be, right? If you work in an organization where nobody smokes, trying to do a smoking cessation program doesn't really make any sense. But if you work in an organization where that is something that is happening and the people who are smoking want to make a change, then that could be a really important area to focus on that could have some great results. But if those folks are not interested in a smoking cessation program, then that could also be very controversial and create some friction that doesn't need to be there. So again, just you need to get that feedback on the front end. That's certainly true for some of these other areas too, like weight management. Some organizations love to do weight loss challenges. For other people, they are not going to want to do something like that at work. You have to know your audience. And I won't read this whole list for you, but here's some other ideas. So these are some models, again, pre-COVID, for things that could happen activity-wise. So it could be, so in our organization, we try to do some information sharing. So we usually have a topic each month that we can focus on. That can certainly happen during these times. And you figure out what the best way to communicate your topic and information is. We often share it in our total staff meeting, and then I will send out other webinars or self-assessments or things like that people can do on their own time that accompany whatever the topic is we talked about in our staff meeting. Some of these events can be held virtually these days. I talked about that, some of our meetups that we've done. Bringing in other speakers to do topics like we're doing this morning. And then, some of these things we just might want to hold off on for a better time. But the important thing to keep in mind is that whatever you choose as an activity as a result of that feedback that you collected, that first participation goal, especially in the early days and really ongoing, 15 to 35% is really excellent result. So just keep that in mind. Whatever you do is not going to appeal to everybody. And even if it does, they're not always going to be able to participate for a wide variety of reasons. But if you could get 15% of your staff to participate in your activity, that is a great success. So that's what we should be thinking, that everybody's going to participate could be a little demoralizing if that's not what ends up happening. Communication is huge. So again, I shared that I send out our agenda ahead of time. I also send out the minutes, and I used to send them to just the wellness committee, but that really excluded other people. So if for some reason they hadn't been participating in the past, all of a sudden people had the impression that they weren't invited, that it wasn't their, oh, I'm not part of that committee. Or when new staff joined our team, they may not have known about the wellness committee. So I found that I was much more successful if I sent the communication out to the entire staff. If people aren't interested, they don't have to read it, but at least they know they're invited. And I make that invite every month when I give my update. We also have started including this in our onboarding process. So when people go to HR, when they first join the team, they are told that there is a wellness committee and that it's something they can participate in, and they'll be finding out more information. Pre-COVID, we used to include lunch. So we did a potluck lunch as part of our wellness committee meetings. I took over the wellness committee from someone else. And when I started, the meetings were always first thing Monday morning. And I don't know about you, but running or participating in a meeting first thing Monday morning is really stressful. And so we didn't have great participation because it wasn't a priority for a lot of people. They were really busy. They wanted to get their work started for the week. They just needed to focus on that. So this kind of took a back seat. So I changed the time to lunchtime. And that created more flexibility because hopefully everybody's going to stop and eat lunch. That is a practice that is highly encouraged. And we decided we would do it as a potluck. Everybody could bring a healthy dish to share if they so chose. And I would always make sure I brought extra food, so if you forgot your lunch, then you could join us. People would pop in to use the microwave, and suddenly they were part of the meeting and they didn't even realize it, but they were interested in the topic that was being discussed, and then they would share their opinions, and we got a lot more engagement, and our group became a lot more diverse. It's also how we had people who would tell us everything they disliked about the wellness committee and would have their unhealthy lunch with us. And those became some of our most dedicated members because we learned what not to do, the things that were kind of putting people off. So those are some best practices that I would encourage. Over these last few months, we've encouraged people, we still keep the meeting at lunchtime. We hold it over Zoom, and we encourage people to bring their lunch to the Zoom, and then we talk about what we made for lunch that day. So it's not quite the same, but still in the same spirit. And then we've tried to provide incentives. I'm going to talk to you more about how we have been able to make a little bit of money for our to support these incentives for our wellness committee. But we've done things like we did everybody who came to the meeting, we'd put their names in a hat and pull it out, and they would get a healthy prize for coming to the meeting. We've also done, if we've had monthly challenges, whoever was the winner of the challenge, then they got a healthy prize. Or we'd put everybody who participated in the challenge, they put their name in a hat and do it raffle style. Again, kind of depends on what's going to motivate your team. We've been giving out little prizes for our bingo meetups. And right now, our wellness committee is focused on a holiday celebration. So we typically have a holiday party. We're not having our traditional holiday party this year, so we're looking at doing a virtual week. We started Spirit Weeks pre-COVID, and those have become a really big focus over these last few months. So regular Spirit Weeks where everybody takes a picture with their favorite mug or wearing a silly shirt or things like that. Right now, our wellness committee for the month of November is doing a gratitude bingo, which I can share with you guys. And so rather than traditional bingo, because bingo's been a big hit, each square on the board has a different activity you can do to show your gratitude. So like saying something nice about a coworker, paying it forward in some way. There's all different kinds of suggestions, sending somebody flowers. And if you do 5 in a row, then you get bingo. And then we'll put your name in a hat and we'll draw a winner by Thanksgiving. So group activities can be a great way to create and foster some camaraderie. It's important that you find out ahead of time what time of day or what types of activities people might be interested in. Some organizations really love things like sports leagues, but you have to find the time it's going to work. So we found out that not everybody in our organization has the same schedule, and not everybody is in the office all of the time. So trying to do something during the day outside of lunch was a big challenge. It excluded a lot of people. So then we started asking people, would you like something that was right after work? Would you rather do something on the weekend? Kind of getting that input ahead of time. And then finding out what might be the right fit in terms of group activities. As I mentioned, right now, we're trying to do a lot of group activities that can be done virtually, where we don't all have to actually be together at the same time, but that we can either do over the computer or people can participate in and kind of share their results. And then you could have site-based programs. So these are things you could actually bring into your organization, or again, do over Zoom these days. I'm going to talk more about employee assistance program, but you've probably seen this too, both locally and just across the country, a lot of virtual things like virtual yoga classes happening, or even there's a lot of resources over YouTube. So there's still ways to replicate many of these activities virtually. Before COVID, one of the things that we did was a healthy vending area. So a way that we were able to help shape our environment is to provide healthy, low-cost snacks. So if you forgot your lunch or you need a snack, rather than running out for fast food or to a traditional vending machine, which we used to have and no longer have, we had these healthy snacks, and they were all really cost-effective. Right now, we're not able to have our healthy vending, but this is a way to generate a little bit of fun. So this is what was paying for those raffle prizes that I was talking about. So this is what our vending area looked like instead of a traditional vending machine. And then these are some other examples from other organizations that we worked with for how they set up their healthy vending. Got a couple other examples here from other organizations for different things. So this was a step challenge that was done. And again, you don't all have to be walking together. You can find different ways for people to participate. We talked about communication before. So figuring out how people like to be communicated with. It can be dedicating information on your website, housing things there, sending out either paper newsletters or e-blast newsletters, putting it on meetings on the agenda to share things, potty talk or toilet talk. So being able to post that information in different locations, either in the restroom or, we've put things up at the microwave where people are using that to heat up their lunch. They can find out about different activities or different educational topics, or next to the coffee maker. These days, finding out how do people like to be communicated with virtually. Some people love the emails. Other people are going to say that's too much. I'm getting too many emails. So another option that we created was a Facebook group. So we created a closed Facebook group and invited everybody on the staff to join the Facebook group. And then we put information there. So that way, if people weren't interested, they weren't getting inundated with emails, but if people wanted to participate, they knew where to find the information. So that's another option. These are some other examples of healthy messaging that could be used. So there's information about reducing sugar, encouraging people to take the stairs. There's an indoor walking mat that you see with the footprint there. Lots of different options. We talked about collecting feedback. So this is some of the feedback that you're going to want to ask yourself as a committee once you get things started. So what was our goal? So if our objective was to hold an event and have 15% of staff participate, did the program meet its objective? How many people did participate in that program? Did we get the results that we were looking for? What did people say about it? Did they like it? Do we have any data to support the positive effects? So are we able to link it to anything about, did it reduce, has our program over time reduced sick leave? Obviously, some of these things are going to take longer to collect this data. I'm not going to get it right out the gate, but it's always wonderful if you can connect your activities to some of this data. How much did the program cost? So maybe not a lot of people participated, but did it take a lot of time or effort to pull it off? And was there much cost involved? So if the answer is no, it was pretty easy to pull it off. Maybe even if we didn't get a lot of participation, maybe it still met some of our program objectives and we would still consider it successful. And then what changes would we want to make in the future? If we did this, are we going to do this again next year? How are we going to make it better?
April, real quick, we're at about Q2, and we have a question real quick about, did team members participate in the wellness Facebook group?
Oh, yes. So thanks for asking that question. Well, we've had really good participation in the wellness Facebook group. It tends to ebb and flow. So I have noticed if I stop posting things, so since I'm sort of the administrator of it, if I stop posting things, then the conversation dies down. So I have to, be pretty, I have to keep up with posting things on there to engage. Some of the same strategies you would probably use with your own organizational Facebook page. So asking some open-ended questions for participation rather than just putting information out there tends to up our engagement. And then I also have to be mindful that my organization is a large organization, and we tend to have a lot of staff turnover just because of the nature of our grant funding. So I have to always remember to invite people to the Facebook group. So not taking for granted that everybody knows that it exists. So if I do those things, I tend to see really good results. And I always see an uptick whenever I do that. But if I don't do anything with the Facebook group, then yeah, I do see it kind of like peter out. It also depends on the season. I think we're trying a lot of different things with wellness right now because Zooms were super popular in the beginning, Zoom meetups, and then all of our work, transitioned to Zoom, and people, I think we've all experienced some level of Zoom burnout. So looking for other ways to stay involved. So then Facebook maybe becomes a little bit more popular. So I think we have learned you've got to get more employee feedback more regularly right now than maybe traditionally. Traditionally, we would do this survey annually and create an action plan. Right now, life is changing so much so fast that we're collecting feedback on a more regular basis. This is a great time to stop for other questions as we're wrapping up today. I just put this slide up here. So this is what like the gold standard would look like. This is not what, any of us should hope for in the first year. And if you do, that's fantastic. But this kind of gives a picture of what we could be talking about in our perfect world scenario. So just lots of different types of things to aim for. What other questions do you guys have so far about getting started?
I just mentioned that it would be really interesting because things are changing so fast. Getting a level on the mood of the organization pre versus post wellness initiative, or even just a single like activity that you could just try to see how people do. I think that would be really telling.
Absolutely. This is a great time to be experimental, to just try stuff, especially if we're doing things virtually. They don't have to be, it's not like we're setting up a 5K fun run or something like that. It can be really simple activities. Like I said, our spirit weeks where everybody wears a certain color that day or takes a picture with their mug. And then we've also used those on our regular CCE Facebook page to kind of boost our organization, just to kind of show that it's a tough time right now, but it's a fun place to work. And we've seen a lot of benefits of that. And we've also seen other organizations do similar things. It's really fun. We need more fun in our lives right now, right? So I'm just going to show, these are some pictures of some other initiatives with other organizations. So this is something that's part of our comprehensive wellness plan, is to support breastfeeding, standing desks, our organization and other organizations. We had a staff and community garden. So as Camille brought up earlier, some of these things sound great, but maybe aren't, it's not the right time for all of them. But here's what it is the right time for. So this is what we have found in our organization about what employees need right now. So this may or may not be the right time for a weight loss challenge for your organization. It is not the right time for me for a weight loss challenge. But what people really need is they need validation, connection, and access to resources. And this is what we're going to talk about more next time as well. So when I say validation, breaking down that stigma about talking about mental health, we have put a lot of focus on our organization about making it okay to talk about how we're doing. Just literally doing that. When you have a check-in with your team, your supervisor, or as a full staff, one of the first things we're doing is, how's everybody doing? We have a little bit more talk about our personal lives than we maybe did in the past, because people really need space to talk about some of the things that are stressing them out. And that has been very validating for our staff, knowing that it's okay to not always be okay. Connection. So a lot of our worksite wellness activities right now are just about how can we make people feel connected. So that bingo, Spirit Week, going hiking the Appalachian Trail together, doing a water challenge, encouraging each other to drink more water. These are just all ways to try to help us feel connected. Even just coming to wellness committee meetings. I think people are more apt to join a club or a committee right now just to feel connected. And then just trying to push out as many resources as possible. So we'll be sharing these with you guys, but things like how to do chair stretches at home, how to get up more often when you're finding yourself behind the computer all day, where to access some free online fitness videos, getting started with like meditation and mindfulness if you've never done that before. We've devoted some of our web pages at CCE to this. We've also been pushing some of this out through social media, but sharing with our staff, financial resources. Times are tough for a lot of people right now financially. People who never experienced that before may all of a sudden be feeling the pinch. So giving people access to some more of these resources. Parents are very challenged with being pulled in a million directions right now. What resources can we give out for that? And there's how can we all take better care of ourselves? So these are some of the things that we're finding to be very vital for a wellness committee right now. It's a little different than our focus in the past. So here are some resources that we are sharing out. Who has an employee assistance program at their worksite? Does anybody know? If you're not sure, this is one of our homework questions. And this is a program that your employer can pay into. There is a cost involved, but it does provide all of the resources that you see listed here. And for a lot of organizations that maybe didn't have employee assistance programs before, this is something that a lot of people are willing to now consider. So it's definitely something that you could advocate for. If you have this program, make sure that your employees know about it and that you're fully utilizing all of the resources. And if you do, then this is a great thing to bring to your wellness committee to be able to highlight some of these resources. If you don't, and it's not something that your organization feels that they can afford at this time, there are still ways to access a lot of these types of resources for free. Pivot organization locally manages a lot of the local employee assistance programs. Their Facebook page is an excellent resource where they put out a lot of this type of information and you can access it for free. So you don't necessarily have to pay into an employee assistance program to still find a lot of these resources. They're just more prominent and conveniently located if you do participate. Christy, I saw the chat was kind of lighting up there. Is there anything to share from the chat?
Just a few people did write that they do have an EAP, and I asked if they used it. And one person said that not really. I don't feel like I know enough about or feel comfortable enough to use a random counselor services that I could find on my own. And then another person, I have used some of the services, but overall I think that it is underused by most employees. Yeah, I agree.
I know when we were kind of thinking about this, our employees, so we had participated previously, and then at some point it was decided that it wasn't financially viable a long time ago. And so our organization had no longer participated. But nobody really knew. So I was like, do we have an employee assistance program? And it took me to do a little digging before I was able to get a solid answer about that. But through some advocacy, we were able to make the case to reinstate that employee assistance program. So we now are newly participating again. But if we don't let employees know what resources are available through that, I think it's very easy for those programs to become underutilized and then to go away, for sure. Okay, so this is homework between today and the next time we meet. So some of these questions I've already asked you, but this is what we would like everybody to think about and start doing. So, do you have a worksite wellness committee in place? If you do, does it meet some of the best practices that we talked about in terms of diversity? How often is it meeting? Are you meeting right now? So those are some things that we would encourage. How can you get that worksite wellness committee back up and running? If you don't have one, can you start recruiting members? Put the word out. If you need help with any of this, Christy has my contact information. It's about to pop up on your screen. You can certainly feel free to reach out to me. Find out if you have an employee assistance program if you're not sure. And if you have one, do some investigation and find out if there's some resources there that you might want to promote as part of your wellness committee. If you don't have one, check out the Pivot Facebook page or check out what other resources you might be able to bring to the table. Does your health insurance provider offer any other programs or incentives? Or does your worksite participate in any other types of programs that would fall under this category? And then start to think about doing that survey. So employee needs assessment. I'm going to show you some questions you'll want to include, but let's get some input as to what your staff would like. What is going to be a good fit right now? What's not going to be a good fit? And then can you identify 3 community resources that you could use to promote worksite wellness? And I want you to bring those to our next session so we can share them. And then everybody should have a great list of where to get started. So, I lost my slide. So in terms of collecting some feedback from staff, we talked about it a little bit, but just again, asking those questions about what types of activities, are people going to be interested in participating in a YouTube Zumba class, or is that just not the culture of your organization? Would Tai Chi be more appropriate? Or would it be doing something that's more social, like an online murder mystery club as opposed to a fitness class? So kind of get a comprehensive list together of some of the types of activities that we've talked about today and just see what people think, how they react to those. Is there a better time that people would like to meet? Would they rather participate on their own, or would they like to get together over a virtual platform like Zoom or Microsoft Teams? Or would they like to be part of a Facebook group? These are some questions that you can ask and get some answers to start to shape your action plan. So the next time we meet next month in December, we're going to talk about all of that, and then we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some resources for our crazy COVID times. What questions do you have before we say goodbye?
One of my struggles is when a wellness activity is offered outside of the normal workday. It feels more like another chore to fit in my already busy schedule. How do you suggest incorporating this into the workday?
Oh, that's a really good question. So if you have that senior level management buy-in, you often can have a little bit more flexibility. So I don't think that pre-COVID, our leadership team would have really supported people spending their work time playing bingo, right? That probably wouldn't have been considered a great best practice. However, knowing what people are going through and how much people are missing some of that communal time, allowing people, once a week or once a month to get together for 20 minutes for bingo during work time has now become an acceptable practice because the value of that is recognized. So I think finding out what is acceptable is important. And if you have that senior buy-in, you may have some more flexibility. If not, lunchtime meetups, I think are beneficial. And again, I'm just like grabbing a quick lunch here at home now. I'm not spending the same time. I'm not driving anywhere to go get lunch. So lunchtime meetups feel a little more feasible to a lot of people right now. But collecting that information from your coworkers too, like when is going to work. Some people might really want a break right after work right now because we don't have good transition from home and work. It's all kind of blending together. But some people might be very overwhelmed with things at home. There's never going to be a perfect fit for every person, but I think asking those questions is really important. I hope that answers your question. And keep it short. Whatever you're going to try to start with, keep it short and simple so that if it doesn't work out, it's not like you've spent a huge amount of time or resources on something as you're testing the waters.
Great points, April. Thanks, and have a great well day. Thank you, April.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.